this pod, we're going to be learning about immigration. Immigration just deals with people moving around the world. Immigration is something that's a big part of U.S. history, and we're going to learn about what immigration means, what it has, how it has impacted U.S. history, and what it has to do with us today. So our objectives are: we're going to define what and where immigrants come from, and we're going to describe factors influencing immigration. That just means we're going to try and figure out who immigrants are, where they came from, and why they come to the United States. Our essential question is, why did immigration occur in such large numbers? So how come so many people want to come to the United States, and why has it been like that during certain time periods, including today? So for generations, our families have migrated. That means that all of us more than likely have somebody in our past, in our family tree, that is from another country. They came to America for who knows what reason. Maybe they were just trying to have a better job or have a better life. Maybe the country that they were in had a lot of violence in it. Maybe like a war was going on. Or maybe the country they were in didn't have a whole lot of rights, like voting and things like that. So maybe they wanted to come to the United States for that. But what we do know is that all of us are probably descended from people who came from somewhere else. So the United States has always been a destination for people around the world seeking something better. We're going to try and figure out why. So this has been going on for a long time. It started with early Europeans and Africans. Europeans came here for a variety of reasons. Some, like the Pilgrims, had wanted religious toleration, meaning they wanted to practice their religion. They also had economic reasons, meaning that they wanted to kind of set up their own businesses and profit from it. So those are people that chose to come to the United States. But there's been people that have been brought to the United States even though they probably didn't want to. Slavery is a big part of American history. And African Americans, a lot of them are descended from slaves that were brought here against their will since the early 1600s. So both are examples of immigrants. Both are people that came from somewhere else to the United States. But the difference is, one group came because they wanted to, one group came because they did not want to. And immigration starts to get really high around the year 1900, so about 115 years ago. So immigration means moving into one country from another. And it's occurred throughout the history of America, just like we said. And we call the era of immigration 1820 to 1930, because that's when a lot of people were coming to the United States. So how many people? Nearly 30 million people came to the United States between 1865 and 1920. Why did they come? Well, we can kind of categorize or put everything that causes people to come to the United States into two categories. One category is a push factor, and one category is a pull factor. A push factor is a reason or force that causes people to leave their native land. So something that's going on in that country that makes you want to leave, like a war, or maybe there's not enough jobs. A pull factor is a reason or force that causes people to choose to move to a new place. So a pull factor is something about the new place that makes you want to go there. Like in the United States, we have liberty. We're allowed to live our lives as we see fit without too much government interference. So that might be something that would attract people to the United States. You can think about it like this. If you're in a room and it stinks, you probably want to leave the room. The smell or the stink is the push factor. That's the thing that makes you want to leave the room. The room that you go to, the pull factor might be because it smells better. That's something that attracted you to the other room. So it's the same thing with immigration. Push factors are things that make you want to leave somewhere. Pull factors are something that attracts you to a new place. Pictures that you see up on the screen are examples of where immigrants went to get processed, which means where their first stop in America to decide where they were going to go. They had to be checked for a variety of reasons, and we'll go over that. They were called Ellis Island and Angel Island. So why have people come to the United States? Maybe they wanted to practice a religion that wasn't tolerated in their country. Maybe they wanted a better life, or they were seeking a better job or more money, and they heard there was a better chance of that in America. Maybe they're political refugees who fear for their lives, meaning that maybe they were kind of big shots in the government in the country they came from, but maybe they fell out of favor or made too many enemies, so they want to come here, for example. Or maybe they have political ideas that don't match that of the government, so they're afraid for their lives. Some want the free atmosphere that we tend to have in this country. Some people have come here against their will, like we talked about with slavery. Some people will come here to be with their families that have already come here before. A lot of people came here because we have so much land in the United States that is plentiful, meaning there's a lot of it, and it can be fairly cheap. There's also the notion that America is this great place where the streets are, it says, paved in gold. And around the world, people talk about it like this great place. That's another reason why people have come here or still want to. So where did people come from? The first group of people occurred from 1865 to 1890. They came from a lot of places in Europe, such as Germany, Great Britain, and Ireland. Wave 2 happened from 1890 to 1920. A lot of those people came from Southeast Europe and the Middle East. They came from countries like Italy and Russia. So you're noticing that for the most part, people were coming from Europe. So European Americans or Caucasian Americans, that's where a lot of them can find their descendants, from people that came from Europe during these time periods. Countries like Ireland, which is where my family came from, Germany, Great Britain, Canada. These are places that immigrants came from. The highest one being Ireland, like you can see in that chart right there. So just to recap, immigration is when you leave a country to go somewhere else. You're immigrating into the United States. So when someone comes into the United States from somewhere else, they are an immigrant, and they are taking part in immigration. If you leave the United States and go somewhere else, you're emigrating. You're leaving the United States. You're emigrating to another country. So how did all these people get here? We talked about, 30 million people coming to the United States. It's a lot of people. And they came here during a time period where there wasn't planes. So how are they getting here? Most of them came here in steam-powered ships, like the one you see in the picture there. And they came across the Atlantic Ocean, which is the ocean that separates North America and Europe. So they came across in these ships, and it would take 2 to 3 weeks. So they'd be on the water for 2 to 3 weeks in these big ships. Most of them traveled in what was called steerage class, which is what it looks like. You can see in the picture right there. Very cramped quarters. It almost looks more like storage than it does like a hotel or a room. And people would just be packed in there, and that's how they would get to America. That's where they spend their time while they were on the boat. So what did it look like? It was large and open, like you saw in the picture. Didn't have many toilets. There's no privacy because you were on top of people. There's people everywhere. Didn't get much food, but the tickets were relatively cheap. So that's where people decided to stay, because a lot of people that ended up coming to the United States, that were immigrants to the United States, they didn't have much money. That's one of the reasons they came here. So what happens when they get here? In 1892, the government made all immigrants take a physical exam. Those who failed were quarantined or sent back home. So they checked you for a variety of things. Most importantly, they checked you for disease. So if they thought you might be sick, they'd quarantine you or cut you off from your family and from everybody else until you got better. If they found a reason they felt was too drastic, they'd just send you back home. Here's a picture of some medical inspections happening, and if you look on the left-hand side, it shows kind of like a chart of all the things that they would check. They check your eyes, your face, your heart, your lungs. They check if you're pregnant or not, stuff like that. So what happens when they get past that point? They get past the exam and everything. The big places that people went were the big cities. New York City and Boston on the East Coast, and places like San Francisco on the West Coast. Sometimes they went more inland to bigger cities like Chicago, or maybe they traveled west. But for the most part, they were coming in big cities, and a lot of them would stay in those big cities when they came. So just to wrap things up, what did we go over today? We went over some immigrant vocabulary. We talked about push factors, which are things that make you want to leave a place. We talked about pull factors, which are things that make you want to come into a place, that attract you to a place. We talked about immigration mainly. Remember, that means leaving your country and for somewhere else. We talked about emigration. Went over a little bit of immigrant history as well. So what's this got to do with what we're doing in the future? We're going to start to look at how these people were treated once they started to build a life for themselves in those big cities and around the country. We're going to try and figure out what all that has to do with us today. Because what the immigrants went through during the time periods that we've talked about, if it wasn't for them and what they went through, things might be very, very different today. A lot of the things that we have today and take for granted is because of the experience that immigrants had during this time period. So we'll talk about that throughout the pod. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Make sure you answer the questions that are underneath of this video. If you don't have any questions, good luck.